Welcome to the castle, everybody. This is Nightsaber Z42, and today we're going to do something a little bit different for the whole fantasy or the future fantasy vlog. Instead of actually going over new content, I'm going to actually answer some of your questions that I've received, as well as some feedback and stuff like that. And this is kind of just a take it easy kind of week. I'm still kind of going through the whole dwarf process. I've gotten some feedback on that, and it definitely needs some work. But I'm also going to be doing gnomes for this next week, and so I'm trying to get all of that prepared. But for now, I have about 5 different questions I'm going to answer, and these are just some general world building questions to kind of help flesh out the future fantasy setting. And so, first off, what is the council? Okay, so the council, as I have thought of it, that I've kind of been thinking about, are going to be all of these different races. So, like, we have humans are going to have a diplomat that sits on the council. The elves will have a diplomat that sits on the council. The dwarves actually have four, because there's going to be one for each of the kings, although they act as one cohesive unit, so they really only get one vote. And then any other race that has attained that high level of diplomatic status within the galaxy will also have a seat on the council. Kind of like how Mass Effect does it a little bit, only it's not going to be limited to just, the few species. So, like, for example, towards the end of my timeline, I had it to where the Tabaxi race attains a seat on the council for their work in actually helping create the galactic economy standard. And so, as new species actually are added into the whole melting pot of the galaxy, they can attain certain diplomatic stats. Or states, I guess. So, for example, a non council race would be at the lower tier. They get some privileges, like actually being able to use the galactic standard in terms of the economy. And then as they go up in tier, they get more and more privileges and certain protections, let's just say, until you get to the highest tier where you're actually allowed a seat on the council for your species. And so that's still kind of being fleshed out. So, in addition to that, what's the power dynamic between members and non-members? So, currently, there was one species that I had in mind that wasn't a member of any of the whole standard or the whole galaxy politics, and that was the Viscari, I believe, the lizard people, because they were really invaders from across the gap, and so they actually came and invaded. But eventually, they actually did earn that diplomatic status for their effort in the war against the whatever insect name that I decided to come up with, and they actually attained that diplomatic status for their people. But in terms of anything else, like when a new species has been confirmed, or if once they've actually, attained a reason of going out into space and they meet the council, there's a whole process that they have to go through. But I would say that the council races are actually fairly accepting of any new species, because once you grow, your economy is going to bloom basically, and so they're going to want more and more species to kind of help flesh that out overall. But a lot of the different species, especially like if a player decides to create a species in my game, then that species would be at the lower tier of diplomatic status, and so that race would have or that whole entire species would have less privileges in terms of the whole galaxy. And so that's kind of how I'm kind of viewing it. And I'm kind of like using Mass Effect as my whole inspiration for that, because I think Mass Effect really did it something pretty unique with that. Next question: what is magic and how does it work? Or specifically, what races can use it? So magic in future fantasy is like a very in tunement with nature or the mystical forces. And so a long time ago, I would say that humans could actually use magic, right? And so as they gained technology and modernized themselves over time, they actually lost that functionality and they've lost that way. And so humans will actually have something else, which I'll get into in the next question. But certain species like the elves can use magic, dwarves can use magic. So there's actually going to be some species that can use magic and some that cannot. And I think that's a way of actually balancing things out a little bit, because one of my main concepts for the future fantasy setting was that each race is going to have access to certain classes, and certain races will not have access to certain classes. So, like, for example, the humans won't have access to wizards or the wizard class or whatever it's called in this game because they can't use magic. They use psionics, which I'll get into in just a second. But certain races will actually be able to utilize that, either one or the other. And some races will actually be able to utilize psionics, and some will be able to use magic. And maybe, who knows, in the future, depending on what I think, they might actually be able to utilize both in like some sort of a mixed way. I think that would be really interesting to come up with a race that can utilize both. So that's kind of how magic works a little bit. It's a mystical force that a person can tap into to basically cast their spells. Not quite sold on if we're going to go in the route of Dungeons and Dragons, where you need a spell book as a wizard to cast a spell, or if possibly going the sorcerer route would be the best option in terms of the whole setting. But we're going to have to flesh that out quite soon. What is psionics and how does it work? So the opposite side of the question is about psionics. And so psionics are going to be exclusive to humans and other non-magic type races. Or, again, I would really be interested in creating a race that can kind of mold both of them. I think that would also be interesting. But for now, psionics is using basically mind power in order to cast quote-unquote spells. So in certain systems in psionics, you would have psionic points that you would spend to cast spells. Kind of like how sorcerers work in 5th edition. In fact, one of the things I was really thinking about was how to implement psionics in this game. I actually kind of thought about what if instead of using like a specific psionic class, I just used the whole sorcerer magic path and just use that as psionics. That way it would be different from wizards, and they would share some of the same spells, but in terms, they're actually using like the spells or psionic points in this case to cast their spells or abilities. But it's still going to take a little bit more resources or research, because there are some certain resources that I would like to get my hands on to actually read through before making that decision. But that's kind of where my process is right now, is where or how magic is going to be different from psionics, or how are they going to be similar. So there's that to implement. Next question, or rather some explanation. Information in how it gets across the universe. So one of the things that I thought really early on, especially when I was doing my FTL video, was how fast is information going to get across from one point or from one system to the next system. And I think the Traveler RPG system does it pretty well. I think it's in that book. I don't have that book quite yet. But from what I remember, in Traveler, they implement a Courier System. And actually, out of a friend, one of my players actually suggested this too. So what would happen So let's go back to how FTL works. So in human FTL, they have something like a warp or a Stargate, where they actually go through the gate and it propels them in faster than light speeds from one system to another system. Kind of like how the mass relays work in Mass Effect. So you go through the relay and it pops you over to the next system. It goes one right there and then back. So it's only from one point to a B point. So A to B or B to A. It can't go from A to C, which goes into a different system because it's not pointed there. It can only go where that specific gate is pointing. So let's say that if I want to get information from the solar system over here to the Tower system, then I would go from the gate to that gate, right? My ship would go from from the gate and connect to the solar system. So let's just say that we're using a courier system. So that means all information going out of the system would be accumulated at the gate relay, which would be like basically a space station that the gate is implemented into for trade and other stuff like that, especially for this courier system. So as a ship goes through the gate, they get information, they get a data spike, let's just say, that all ships, especially merchant ships, have to basically have. And it's actually just it's going to be like going to a hard drive that is non-accessible to the crew or anybody else, because I mean, you don't want your credit card number stolen if you're trying to buy something from another system. But it your ship automatically downloads that data. So once you plot your course, like let's say that I know that I'm going from Towie system to Sol system. So once I've gone through that gate, or as I'm going through that gate, I get that data spike. It's downloaded to my ship, and then I plot and I actually go to the Sol system. So once I pass through that gate, the information gets uploaded to that space station or that gate station, and then gets distributed to wherever it's going, whether it's going to Pluto base or if it's going to Mars or to Earth. It's going to just send that out. And my reasoning for this was that I really wanted to keep things where a lot of the time you're going to be going in speeds less than FTL. So really you're only going from FTL when you're actually going from system to system. That's pretty much it. And so I guess in a way you might have like pirates, hunting that data down, I guess. But anyways, so really when you're going through a gate, you're actually telling like your what are those people called, that air traffic controllers. You're basically telling those Stargate controllers your itinerary, where you're going, and stuff like that. So that way they can actually give you the information that is going to the systems that are going along the way. So that way, if you're going from, like, let's say you're going to Alpha system to Taui system and then to Sol system, so that's two different systems that you're going. So you can get a data spike for the Taui system, and you can also get a data spike for the Sol system from Alpha system. So that way, once I get to Taui, the data gets uploaded that belongs to Taui system, and then once I get over to Sol system, all that data gets uploaded. Now, the only issue that I'm seeing with this sort of a system is what happens if the ship is lost. So a workaround for that is that this wouldn't be the only ship that gets that data spike. So let's say that multiple ships are getting that data spike that are going across that intersystem highway or Stargate. So that way, at least one of them will upload that data, and then any data that gets uploaded, if it's reoccurring, it just gets deleted. I think that would be a fair way of doing that. That way, information from system to system will get there eventually. So that's kind of how I thought of how information gets across the galaxy. It's going to be slow as it should be. It shouldn't be instantaneous like quantum particles in Mass Effect, which is just okay. Sure. How big is the universe? Or sorry, how big is the galaxy? How much has been explored? And what about unexplored regions? So if we're thinking of the Milky Way system, I would say at least a good third of it has been explored by races like the elves, the gnomes, dwarves, humans, and all of the others. And so there's something called the gap. This is going to be like the unexplored space. So if we think about it in terms of north, south, east, and west, the Sol system would be on the southern side, and it's going to basically create like a little bit of a curve of the elves, the dwarves, and all of the other species that have gotten in contact with each other. So we have this little southern quadrant right here. And then everything above that to the northern side is going to be the gap. And then of course you have the core, which has gone there yet. And then further on the edge of the galaxy, up in the very top northern quadrant, is going to be where the Viscari come from, or the lizard people. They occupy that space. And when they actually come to the southern part to start their wars and claiming space, now they're going to have some that are up there in the wild space, I guess is what we can call it for now, up in the northern quadrant of the galaxy. And a majority of the Viscari that are going to be used in terms of player characters and stuff like that, and NPCs, would actually be living in that southern quadrant or have grown up in that southern quadrant away from that Viscari. So the Viscari, I guess, would have two different sub races, the wild space Viscari and then the normalized Viscari, I guess, would be a way to term them, but oh well. So basically, even the Viscari haven't really done a whole lot of exploring of the galaxy. So we have the southern quadrant, and then anything above that, the council races would not have explored that quite yet. So all of that space is going to be open for exploration. And I did that specifically for basically just to say that you have this whole empty canvas to go out exploring, and you can make of it what you want. So there you go. So those are 5 different questions that have come out. That have either been sent to me on Discord or by email or even in the comments. So if you have a question, definitely leave it in the comments down below, or you could email me at nightsaberzy42@gmail.com. Just email questions, and I really do appreciate those questions too, by the way, because it really gets me thinking about certain things and fleshing those pieces out before I actually commit to a certain idea or flow. So thank you for those questions. I really do appreciate it. And while I'm on that topic, I really also appreciate thumbs up for these videos, because they really help me out in the end. Not that I'm getting paid for these, I just do this for fun. And subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys in the next video.